And when I get to the specifics, my mind is still spinning with the big theme instead of paying attention to whatever the specific thing is. So anyway, today we are going to finish our talk about prophecy and time in regards to Daniel. I do have here a handout that you're welcome to take. It's a kind of thick. It's basically the slides and my comments on the slides, just typed out. Also at the top edge are the main resources that I used in getting this information. These are the sources, most of the books. I think someone borrowed the Daniel book today, but anyway, you can see this is the Daniel book that I was using. It's by Dr. Ken Johnson. He gives the specific calculation on how to move from BC to AD. And when the prophecy goes over the change of that, then that's when the scholars things get skewed. And so he shows how to do that. And we're going to do it again today for 2 different events. So so you're welcome to take that after we are done if you want to. And then there's a few other shorter handouts up there. So if you've missed anything, you're welcome to hand out. The books are my books. I bring them. You can borrow them, bring them back. If you want to borrow and keep it, then tell me and I'll buy a new one. Most of the books that I read, listen to on Audible, and I'll listen to on Audible 3 or 4 times, just listening to it. But I get the book so that when I want to go look for something, I can write it down and not try to find it on Audible. So you're welcome to borrow the book and bring it back, or let me know and I'll buy a new one for myself. So, okay. Dr. David Jeremiah is a big source. He doesn't give always the real specific scientific stuff, but the Daniel one, that book, and the one by the lady, Jen Markle, she gives, and the Sharon Rhodes, they give very specific, the same kind of specific information, a little bit of a different format. My favorite is always Jimmy Evans. I just like the way he wrote his book. It's very simple language. It doesn't get into those details, but it gives you the facts, and I just like the way he writes it. Dr. David Jeremiah is also one of my favorites. He talks about the same things. He gives it in a more broader format, but he's really good. So if you want to borrow any resources, you're welcome to do so. So at first, after settling, we got to remember where we're coming from, okay? So at first, after settling in the Promised Land, the Israelites obeyed God's Sabbath law, but then they didn't. So for 490 years, the Israelites continued planting and harvesting their land, and they ignored the 70 Sabbath years. Remember that?
Wow.
Remember that? So for each Sabbath year the Israelites ignored, God sentenced them to 1 year of captivity. That's where the 70 years comes in, and that's allowing the land to catch up on its Sabbath years. So 70 years of captivity from the summer of 586 BC, that's when the Jerusalem fell, and you arrive at 516 BC. That is the year that those who returned from Babylon captivity rebuilt and dedicated the second temple. So remember, there's 2 important phrases here, and sometimes we, looking back, we don't notice the slight difference. They came back out of captivity, but the temple and everything was destroyed. It took them about 3 to 4 years to get what was the temple in Jerusalem functioning and offering sacrifices. In fact, it was such a rudimentary temple that we have historical references to how the Jews who came back from captivity wept over how awful the temple looked compared to what it used to be before. So it was just barely put together, but they at least began offering sacrifices, and that's the exact 7 years from the time Cyrus made the decree until they began offering sacrifices again, is when the time frame is. So here we have to, the second temple is 1 mark, but there's a second mark that we're going to talk about today. And the second mark is when the walls and the gates of Jerusalem get put up. That is another beginning sign when Artaxerxes gives the order to Nehemiah to go build the wall to Jerusalem. That is a different sign, a starting point. So as we're looking at our timelines, you got to think about, okay, one is Cyrus sending them back, but it took them 3 years. There's the 70-year mark. But there's another mark that we're going to see today that's based on them having put up the actual gates and walls of the city, Jerusalem being set up again. So take a look at Daniel 9:25. Pay attention to the yellow part. That's the main part for today's. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. That was not Cyrus. Remember, Cyrus was the one who told him to go back into the land, right? Mm-hmm. But from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, that was Artaxerxes and Nehemiah. Until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. So the people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. So when the command to rebuild the Jerusalem is given, that marks the beginning, and then the end of the time frame is going to be with the death of the Messiah, because that death is what ushers in the new kingdom. So you've got the beginning and the end. Nehemiah 2:1 records that in the month of Nisan, on the 20th year of his reign, the Persian king Artaxerxes gave the order to Nehemiah to supervise the construction of the gates and walls to the city of Jerusalem. The people had slowly returned under King Cyrus in about 3 to 4 years and had a barely functioning temple, but the city was a wreck. So note that the 70 years was the penalty of the Sabbath years, and that was based on breaking covenant with God. However, it was later that Jerusalem's walls and gates were restored, and in those years between Cyrus and Artaxerxes, the people continued to migrate back to Jerusalem. Here's the numbers that we went over last time. 483 years, that's the Jewish years, times 360 days, gives you 173,880 days. So that converts Jewish years to days. In 173,880 days, that's the modern days then, is equal to 476 years plus 21 days. So March 14th, 444 BC plus 476 years comes out to be March 14th, AD 31. Add 1 year because there was no 0 year between AD and BC. Then add the 21 days and you get April 6th, AD 32. This is the calculation we did last week. So what happened in April 6th, AD 32? The crucifixion, resurrection of Christ. That's when that time frame is. So we were given the date the Messiah would be killed. No wonder Jesus worked so hard to not get crucified too soon. When you read the Gospels, you can't help but see how he's trying to get the message out, get the disciples trained, but he keeps trying to back off certain places and not get too much attention, because he's got to live until the time that he is supposed to die in the prophecy. He knew the prophetic date. Any of them could have known if they knew how to calculate it and read the prophecies. But how could they have anticipated how to translate from, say, the old time to the new time? That would have been so odd. So for those who prefer to hear the same calculation in words, I'm a word person. Maybe you are too. Here's the same thing in words, okay? The total number of days from March 14th, 444 BC to April 6th, AD 32 is as follows. 173,740 plus 24 plus 116 gives you 173,880 days. According to the calendar from Daniel's time, he was told there would be 173,880 days between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the Messiah Prince. So what is 444 BC to 32 AD? From 444 BC to 32 AD is 476 years. From 1 BC to 1 AD, you have to add a year. So modern astronomers calculate a year to be 365.24219.879 days. So you take that number, multiply by 476, and you get the number of days. So this is something we talked about last time. So we talked about how, here's our first timeline, the 70 weeks prophecy between the return to Jerusalem, which including the beginning of temple worship, and then the rebuilding of the city walls and the gates to arrive to the arrival and death of the Messiah in AD 32. Okay, this is what we talked about last week. We also talked about the current state of Israel. Remember, we looked at the Temple Mount. What's on the Temple Mount?
Islamic.
Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock. Remember, we saw pictures of that? And also we talked about the rapture, the snatching away. And what date will that happen? We don't know the date. That's something we're not given a date for. Okay? We know when it happens within the time frame, but we don't know when the actual date is going to be. Or at least at this time, we don't see anything that would make us know what that date is. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The gap. What was the gap? Remember, on the timeline, there's a space where we don't have a number of days. We don't know the number of days until the beginning of that tribulation, 7 years. We don't know the exact number on that. That's all right. We have, at least we don't think we know yet. I'm going to show you some things that might make you realize that when we get closer to the event, we may look back and go, oh yeah, there was this and there was that. We might see it better. So the final 7 years of tribulation, in which a currently non-existing temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is destroyed. So what do we know is going to happen between now and the 7 years? A temple has to be built, because otherwise you can't destroy it. It can't be destroyed. So that'll be all curious to see how that happens. All these prophecies seem unlikely if it weren't for the evidence of the fulfilled prophecies from the past that seemed so unlikely until it happened. Those things we looked at last week, you can imagine that they would know the exact date of that, but we did. And as we get closer, we'll be more likely to know more exact about what's happening in the future. So this week, we're not going to say too much about those other topics. We're going to move on. We talked about them quite a bit last time. But if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and make it. It's just I'm not going to be diving into those. We kind of went into those last week. So Daniel 12:3. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. So who are, in this passage in Daniel, who are those? Who are the wise and those who lead people to righteousness? That's us. That's us. We now have the way to righteousness, do we not?
Yeah.
Is that the message of Christ?
Yeah.
When Daniel received this message, could he have understood that?
No.
To us, it's clear. We can see from our point of view, and that's exactly the point in verse 4. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. In other words, as time goes by, we increase in knowledge, and all of a sudden these things that look so fantastical, we're going, wow, that's crazy. We're going to talk about that Mene Tekel Parsin thing, and we're going to talk about Ezekiel. So there's Daniel and that writing on the wall, which that writing on the wall was for them to know that God was going to send the people back, right? And that Ezekiel, he was just a weirdo. He was given all kinds of weird things to do. Wait until you see how Ezekiel and that writing on the wall give the exact same message. They could not have understood it at that time. But on our part, looking back, we can understand it. And it's spooky. It's so exact. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep an open mind. We're going to be careful not to make assumptions and not to add to what's said. Do you understand why we would do that? You have to be careful to not say, oh, it's going to be this way. When the scripture leaves it open, we need to leave it open. Don't be, just leave it open and keep your eyes wide open to see how it comes to be. And we have to be careful about that when we're reading these. Okay, so we talked about the events in the gap before. Do you see something I've added? See right there between the 1948 and the rapture, I added 1967
Why?
because in 1948, Israel became a nation. But in 1967, Israel was predicted to regain control of the Temple Mount. Two different sources made the same prophecy. So Daniel and Ezekiel both prophesy the 1967 date, the 6-day war, and that when Israel received the Temple Mount control again. Okay, ready? Let's start with Ezekiel. Now Ezekiel's totally a weirdo, isn't he? I mean, Steph, you're reading Ezekiel. I was so glad to find some meaning to this thing that he had to do because it's weird.
The same day or the year?
This will be a sign to the people of Israel. Lie on your left side and put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days you lie on your side. I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So each day is going to be equal to a year. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the people of Israel. Now, who are the people of Israel? Is that everybody? Or is that just the northern kingdom? Verse 6. After you have finished this, lie down again, this time on your right side, and bear the sin of the people of Judah. I have assigned you 40 days, a day for each year. So the 390 days represented the sin of Israel, the northern kingdom, and 40 days represented the sin of the southern kingdom, Judah. So what was their sin? The northern kingdom, certainly they didn't do anything wrong, did they? We had example after example of Israel. In fact, the very first king in the northern kingdom, who was the brother, so it's Rehoboam and they were brothers, right? And the one that took the northern kingdom, the first thing he did was establish an altar to Baal in 2 cities. Remember that? So and then he made his own temple up north in the northern part of the kingdom. From the very beginning, the northern kingdom broke covenant with God. From Judah, we went through several of the kings, and we saw really some very noble ones that kind of cleaned things up and got them back. They kept doing wrong, but the kings would come in and they would clean up. We saw lots of good characters there. So God is saying that the 390 years is representing the sin of Israel, and 40 years is representing the sin of Judah. And here's Ezekiel. He's got to lie on his left side for 390 days. And then he's got to lie on his right side for 40 days. So the total time then was 430 years of sin. The Babylonian captivity took up 70 years of that punishment. So that leaves 360 years. Okay? The Leviticus clarifies the penalty for breaking covenant. Now, when was Leviticus written? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. So really early on, when they'd come and when Moses was taking the information down, he was writing down how they were supposed to do their different worship and all. Remember, we went through all of Leviticus and all the rules and guidance he gave them. So this is Leviticus. This is from early on. This is not Ezekiel's time, and it is not Daniel's time. It's way before, way early in the beginning that they get this message. I never noticed this before. Leviticus 26:14. But if you will not listen to me and carry out all these commands, and if you reject my decrees and abhor my laws and fail to carry out all my commands and so violate my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will bring on you sudden terror, wasting diseases and fever that will destroy your sight and sap your strength. You will plant seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. I will set my face against you so that you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over you, and you will flee even when no one is pursuing you. If after all this you will not listen to me, I will punish you for your sins 7 times over. Are you starting to hear some math getting calculated there? Here God declares that if Israel does not repent after the Babylonian captivity, when Cyrus freed Israel, then the remaining time would be multiplied 7-fold. They were supposed to repent after that 70 years. If you multiply 360 years by 70, you get 2,520 prophetical years. The prophet Daniel predicted the same time period in another way. Did they repent after captivity? They didn't. They didn't. They brought their idols back with them to Jerusalem. They did not repent. And they were, at least from God's perspective, they were not fully repentant. We read in several of the prophetic works that they were worshiping all kinds of gods they brought back with them from captivity. In fact, if you consider their rejection of the Messiah, that as a people, the Jews were not fulfilling the covenant of God. So the following is a quote from the ancient book of Daniel, that one book that I don't have right here, by Dr. Johnson, page 138. I want to quote him because he says it just right. In Daniel 4, God punished King Nebuchadnezzar with insanity for 7 years. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. In order to humble him, God had Nebuchadnezzar act out a prophecy, just as Ezekiel acted out his 430-day prophecy by laying on his side. In Nebuchadnezzar's case, the restoration of his kingdom after 7 years is also a symbolic prophecy that illustrates that the children of Israel would be restored a second time to their land after 7 years of days. Since the prophetic calendar used a 360-day year, if you multiply Nebuchadnezzar's 7 years by the 360-day calendar, you get 2,520 years, just like Ezekiel's prophecy. From the two prophets, we are told the time of the second return of Israel. We will first convert the Jewish years to Roman years, the same way we did for the timeline prophecy of the Messiah's death. Cyrus issued his decree, freeing the Jews and declaring the state of Israel to exist again on August 3rd, 537 BC. Multiply 2,250 Jewish years times 360 days per year to get 907,200 days. The 907,200 days on the modern calendar is 2,483 years and 285 days. So August 3rd, 537 BC plus 2,483 years comes to August 3rd, AD 1946. Add 1 year, because there was no year 0 between BC and AD. When you add the extra 295 days, we arrive at May 14th, AD 1948. This was the very date that the UN declared Israel to be a sovereign nation. How could they have known that back in the day?
I don't know what my mind is spinning.
Yeah, how can you even calculate it? Yes, me too. How can you even calculate it until you get to this time? So now we see that Daniel 4 predicted 1948 for Israel to become a nation again. But Daniel 5 also predicted Israel would take control of the Temple Mount in AD 1967. Let's look at that. Remember in Daniel 5, we read the account of the writing on the wall. Do you remember that story? This handwriting is an inscription prophecy that has a double fulfillment. Daniel left out the first mene in his riddle and interpreted only the second mene, plus the tekel and parson as Hebrew verbs, which literally read, numbered, weighted, and divided. Daniel told Belshazzar that the words of the handwriting on the wall meant that he personally had been weighed and found to be godless. The days of his kingdom had been numbered and had come to an end. His kingdom would be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Remember, that's the number one prophecy, the first one. But look at this interesting. Daniel 4, verse 23. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, parson. So the double fulfillment, the first fulfillment was what we are familiar with, the story we're familiar with. The double fulfillment is for the latter days. First of all, notice that mene is written twice. When Daniel told the king what it meant, did he mention that mene was written twice? Nope, he didn't. If we take these words as nouns instead of verbs, in other words, these same words in the original language could be nouns or verbs. They have different meanings depending on whether you're using it as a noun or a verb. If we decipher them as nouns, they turn out to be the names for weights, money, like money. So many is like 1,000 garahs, and a garah is like a penny to us. It's like a base count. So if we said there's 100 pennies in a dollar, that's the kind of thing that it's saying. A tekel is 20 garahs, and a perez is half a mini. Okay, it's like coins, a quarters, a half dollar, it's the same kind of thing. So parson, the inscription reads 2,520 garahs, or 2,520 periods of time. If you add up the money, you make those words nouns, and you add up the money, you get 2,520. The exact number that we got for the other, right? From Ezekiel. Remember, on this night, they were drinking from the temple vessels, confiscated from the Jewish temple. Do you remember that? On this night, the control of the temple vessels passed to the children of Israel. So we have this now 2,520 periods of time. So the prophecy tells us that from decree Darius would give, granting full control of the Temple Mount, plus 2,520 Jewish years, the children of Israel would again be granted control of the Temple Mount, but not granted the right to build the temple itself. Did it say anything about building a temple? No. The calculations for this timeline prophecy are exactly the same as the ones given for 1948, and there's the math for you. 2,520 garahs, prophetic years, times 360 days, come out to be 907,220 days. The 907 to 220 days on the modern calendar is 2,483 years and 285 days, and that's how you get to your date. Okay, Darius' decree to grant the Jews control of the Temple Mount was August 25th, 518 BC. That was Darius' decree. Do you remember that? This date plus the 907,200 days plus 1 year changing from BC to AD brings us to June 7th, 1967. Do any of you remember the 6-Day War? Did you hear about the 6-Day War? The 6-Day War of 1967 began when the Arab neighbors looked like they were mobilizing for war. So Israel attacked and destroyed Egypt and Syria's air forces. Israel also defeated the Jordanian attacks. The war ended with Israel in control of the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. According to George Lankowski, as early as May 23rd, President Johnson secretly authorized supplying Israel by air with a variety of arms systems, even when an embargo on weapons shipments were placed on the Middle East. Moshe Dayan recognized the immense religious sensitivity of the site. We saw that, the Dome of the Rock and the Wailing Wall there. In a decision widely criticized by some Israelis, Dayan quickly moved to defuse the situation and prevent the conflict from becoming an intractable holy war. He established a new status quo with these elements. Israel maintained overall security responsibility of the Temple Mount. A Waqf is W-A-Q-F. The way it says to pronounce it, is that Waqf? Is that the right way to say it? Waqf? W-A-Q-F? Was established. It's a kind of trust. So the trust was assigned to the Jordanians. So Jordan is controlling the trust, and day-to-day management of the site was handed back to the Islamic Waqf. So there were worship limitations. The Waqf was given authority to determine who could pray on the mount, and this led to a ban on non-Muslim prayer on the site. So a policy that continues today. Jewish people were to pray at the Western Wall. That's a retaining wall for the Temple Mount, rather than on the mount itself. So during that 6-Day War, this in 1967, Israel started before the war like this, with the kind of the territory that we've seen before, And then after the war, look at the area that they controlled and occupied. It included Egypt in that area. But over time, this Waqf and these Jordanian-run trust, all that, adjustments have been being made. Now there's Israel. See how much has been taken back, including the Gaza Strip and all this area that before they had control at. Where's my little poker? Anyway, you can see right up here is Gaza. There's the West Bank. Up there's Lebanon and the Golan Heights, and that whole West Bank area. And then you see where Jerusalem's out in there? Right in here. And this is the West Bank. So Jerusalem is shared by them. Israel has certain rights and the Muslims have other rights, and they share that space. Now that's gonna work out real good, huh?
I'm lost. Where do I find this 64 in Daniel?
1967. When it gives you the years. So here,
Like what book am I in right now?
well, we did. Okay, let me go back. Daniel
I'm back,
4.
I'm lost.
Let's see. We were talking about the Temple Mountain. 423 is where we started with.
Right.
And so that's where the inscription Mene Mene Tekel Parsin. We see it two places. The 2,520 years is in two places. It's Ezekiel and Daniel.
Right.
So so that's where we get the number. And then as we apply that number to the years, it happens right at 1967. So when he says in Daniel that you're going to have the Temple Mount, that's what it's talking about. They have the Temple Mount now. What do they not have? They don't have a temple. They have a mountain, and they don't have really complete control over it. They have some rights to it, but they don't actually have a temple there. Will they have a temple there? Yes, because it's going to be destroyed. There has to be a temple there because it's going to have to be destroyed. So yeah. So here's another set of the timeline from AD 32 to 1948 and then 1967. Those were the weeks that we have. So Daniel 4 predicted the 1948 date. Daniel 4 is the 1948 date, and Daniel 5 is the 1967 date. Control of the Temple Mount. So in 4, it's predicting that they'll become a nation again. And in 5, he's predicting that they'll have the Temple Mount again. Okay? So Daniel 12 now. Okay, we're going good. We're doing good. Hang in there. 12 verse 1. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. So Daniel defines the time of the end as what we know as the 7-year tribulation. The phrase "at that time" refers to the time of the end. That's given in Daniel 11:40. So this time of the end is the time when the Antichrist is revealed. He goes to war with Egypt, persecutes Israel, and then is destroyed in the second coming. We read that in the other prophecies in Revelation and other places. In other words, it's referring to the whole 7-year tribulation. This is important because there are two events that Michael is involved in. Revelation 12, Michael is at war with the devil at the middle of the 7-year tribulation. But here, Michael is standing to protect Israel from the Antichrist war, which will occur the first half of the 7-year tribulation. So that's going to be Michael's task. So here we see from, we have the 69 weeks, we have the gap, and then we have the 70th week. So the 70th week is going to start with the Antichrist confirming the covenant. There'll be 1,260 days. Then the Antichrist stops the temple sacrifices. Then there'll be 1,260 days. And Jesus returns to earth. The Antichrist is slain. Millennial kingdom is established. So you can kind of see the broad perspective of the events. But what are the dates here? We're not given the dates. We know things that will happen. So if we see these things happening, that's how we know that it's beginning. But we're not given dates for the 70th week, just a number of years. We know once it starts, it'll start with the Antichrist confirming a covenant. That seems to be the beginning of the tribulation. He's going to be real popular. Everybody's going to like him. And he'll be favored for 3.5 years. And then he stops the temple sacrifices. So does it get stopped because the temple gets destroyed? We know that we are told the temple will be destroyed, so we don't know. And then another 3.5 years goes before the end time, the very end. So in Daniel 12:5, then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood 2 others, one on his bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. So that's 1 year, 2 years, and half a year. That's 3.5 years. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. So Jesus tells us we will not know the day or hour of his coming. But if you find yourself on earth after the rapture occurs, then you can calculate when the second coming will be. When Christ will come back to earth. That'll be down to the day, because you know it's going to be within these years. So in verse 7, how long? 3.5 years from deliverance or rapture to the breaking of the power of the holy people. In other words, from rapture, verse 1, to mid-trib, when the Antichrist is in full bloom. Now that's his opinion. As we get closer, that has become a much more agreed upon opinion about a pre-trib rapture. Because as we're seeing the signs unfold and understanding some of these other prophecies, more and more scholars are saying, yeah, that's going to be the sign, because that's when kind of like the plug comes out of the tub. Have you ever had the plug come out of the tub and the water just starts scooping, going down so fast? Once the God's people are taken out of this world, it's going to be like that, like the plug is taken out of the tub. It'll just be, 7 years, a real difficult time. The angel did not say when the people would be scattered, but when the power of the people would be overthrown, which means when the Antichrist invades, sets up the abomination, and starts the persecution, which is the middle of the 7 years, then later we will see 1,290 days from the middle of the tribulation until the second coming. Thus, that's the idea of a pre-trib rapture. Okay, Daniel 12, verse 11. 12, verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished. Okay, so here's the days. From the time that the sacrifice is abolished, because you might say, well, how do we know it's 7 years? And the abomination causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. I don't know what that is. As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days, you arise to receive your allotted inheritance. Let's look at a picture of it. So in the last half of the tribulation, we know the 3.5 years is the 1,260 days. The foundation stone, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe that's out of Revelation. Maybe you all know about the foundation stone set. And then there's 2,300 days to something else. So I'm not sure about all of that. It's Daniel 12:11 says, from the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished. So if they're given the daily sacrifice at the temple and that sacrifice is abolished, that's 3.5 years then until the end. And it says, blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of 1,335 days. I'm not sure what that stands for. As for you, go your way to the end. You will rest, and then at the end of your days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. So what's he saying to him? As you go your way to the end, you will rest. At the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. What's he saying? Daniel, just write it down because you're not even going to be here for it. Just write it down so that they have it for the generations that come. We kind of have to do the same thing, don't we? Because there are things we know and there are things we don't know. And we can see by our point of view, we can see on the horizon these things coming. We can look back and see how God specifically kept every promise that he made. Even when it seemed like weird timing and all that, it all came to be. So some of these things we just keep in our minds and our hearts to encourage ourselves that God is in control. Daniel chapter 12, verse 8. I heard, but I did not understand. How many of you are in that boat?
Yeah.
There you go. So I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. So it seems to me that Daniel, being like us, we could use this advice. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
So what does this say to us? In our own words, what is God saying to Daniel that we should always take? We should also take as a message to us.
Be patient.
Be patient. Are you going to be able to hurry it up?
No.
Are you going to be able to delay it?
No.
No. And you don't even know if you're going to be around to that time. Today, this minute may be your last minute on this earth, right? We don't know how long we have. Yeah, the time is not something we control. So why did God bother to tell us these times?
So we could be on the lookout. So we could keep praying and doing what we do with paying attention to his word and all that.
When you know that God has set things in motion, does it help you to trust in the Lord?
Yes.
Because it can seem like the whole world's falling apart, it's all out of control.
Yeah.
It's not all out of control because God is in control. He has set the times, He's set the boundaries, and they're set. And nothing we do is going to change those boundaries of time. What is it that we can change?
How we react to them.
Our hearts, our minds, and sometimes we can influence the hearts and minds of others. We can help them to come to a saving knowledge of Christ. We can help for them to become righteous in God so that they too can join in this. But a new Christian, I wouldn't start talking to them about the prophecies and all the times. But it is comforting for those of us who have experience in the faith to see these things fall into place. Because it's just an affirmation. Yeah, look what God did. Woo hoo! He's doing his thing, right? And we can see it that way. And what do we know on our part? If I die, oh, so sad. Don't be sad for me if I die. If I'm die, just picture me saying, out of here. Right?
Right.
I don't mind being out of this world. If I have to die, I'm all for it. It's going to happen sometime, right? So he's taken away the sting of death. The death has no sting. Right?
Right.
What else? Worry? Can he take away worry? What am I going to do? He set the times. God has set the times. He's told me some of the times, and other times he says, I'm not telling you. So what am I going to say? Now, God, you have to tell me.
Yeah.
Right? He's set times, and other times he hasn't set. You know what I say to myself when the time is not set? I think that has to do, my personal opinion, has to do with free will. That there are people that are going to need to make choices. And I think that God allows us each to make a choice. And I think he's looking for the opportune time when as many as people as possible, when he thinks it's at the premium time, so that he can save as many as possible.
He doesn't want to lose anybody.
Doesn't want to lose anybody. So there are things that are set in time, but there are other things that are not set in time, and only God knows when those things are to come to be. When we see the beginning of the 7 years of tribulation, if we see the beginning of the 7 years, then we're not pre-trib rapture. That'll mean we got to wait till the 3.5 year mark. That'll be our next go out, right? But hopefully we go out at the beginning of the 7 years. So we need to be wise and understand, how did Daniel handle himself? Even as a teenager, he was telling the king what for,
Yeah.
right? How did Daniel, was he one of those real reactive kinds of kids or people? He just held it steady. He just kept holding it steady. When they were going to be thrown in the fire for, remember, for not bowing down to the idol, Daniel wasn't there, but the other three were there, and they were thrown in the fire. Were they weeping and crying and wailing and?
Nope.
Nope. They were thrown into the fire. The guys who threw them in died because it was so hot. The oven was so hot. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were just fine. They recorded that they could see them walking around with a fourth person in there.
Didn't even burn
Loity
their
doity
clothes.
doity. Pardon?
Didn't even burn their
And
clothes.
they didn't smell
And
like
didn't smell of
either.
smoke. Yeah. We
Wouldn't that
need,
freak you out?
What?
I said, wouldn't that freak you out?
we need to have that kind of faith. We need to just be matter of fact, trust what God
Oh,
says
I'm
above
sorry.
all, right? Okay, so this time we saw in number 1, Daniel 12:1, that was the prophecy at the time of the end. Daniel 12:3 were the angel's directions to Daniel. Daniel 12:5-7 was the rapture and persecutions. Daniel 12:11-12 was the last half of the tribulation. Daniel 9:25-26 was the death of the Messiah. And Israel revived. Israel sends him back, restored. That was the second time, Daniel 4. And control of the Temple Mount was in Daniel 5. That's a lot of prophecy. And it slips by us when we're actually reading the book, doesn't it? You go, it's like quirky. The phrases are kind of quirky. But when you set them aside from the story and look at them just in terms of prophecy, you can see God was leaving us breadcrumbs. It's like he was leaving us little signs, little breadcrumbs. So I want to